Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering the future is no longer hidden from you. You open your eyes, and suddenly, the next hour, the next day, maybe even the next decade is visible in perfect detail. You know exactly what's coming before anyone else. Every choice, every random event, every massive global shift, just completely laid bare.
So what if you could actually see the future? What if this one thing that human beings have chased forever through prophecy, science, and intuition just suddenly became real, right in the palm of your hand? It's a wild thought experiment, right? I mean, at first glance, you'd probably think you just won the cosmic lottery.
Okay, let's dive into this. The immediate assumption is that certainty equals absolute comfort. The benefits seem like a literal superpower. You'd avoid accidents. You'd always know the weather, so you're never caught without an umbrella. You'd stop stupid mistakes before they happen, perfectly time your investments, and flawlessly protect your loved ones. You would navigate life with this insane, supernatural level of control. But, that initial fantasy actually hides a much darker reality.
Because the future isn't just some passive book waiting for you to read it. It's a living, highly reactive network of incredibly heavy choices. The absolute second you can see it, you are no longer just an observer of time. You instantly become an active participant in an overwhelming chain reaction. And once that clicks, the future stops being a mystery and starts becoming a massive burden.
Section 1. Personal and moral costs. Let's look at the price of this certainty within the very first concentric circle of your life, which is your family.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is the intense tension between safety and freedom. Yes, the perceived gift is totally undeniable. You catch illnesses early, you stop a fatal car crash, absolutely. But look at the devastating cost. If you know your kid is going to fall and scrape their knee at the playground tomorrow, do you ban them from playing? If you foresee every broken heart, you're going to shield them from every single risk. But a child who is constantly watched and guided by future knowledge never learns resilience. They never learned independence. You're trading spontaneity and the magic of discovery for this sterilized, completely pre-rehearsed life.
And the psychological weight of this is absolutely staggering. What would you actually do if you saw a loved one getting hurt or saw a relationship end before it even started? Look at step 1. You see the loss before it actually comes. Then, step 2. You have to carry the agonizing isolation of knowing this unshared truth. And finally, step 3. You are forced into the impossible choice of whether to speak up or stay silent. If you tell them, do you make it worse? If you say nothing, are you morally responsible for their pain? You'd be living with knowledge that literally no one else can share, which makes you profoundly, deeply lonely, even in a crowded room.
Section 2. Global and economic disruption. Now let's scale this up. What happens when this leaks out to the rest of the world?
The world would absolutely not let this remain your private little miracle. I mean, institutions already spend billions just trying to predict markets milliseconds in advance. Imagine if they had actual, undeniable certainty. Governments would instantly classify you as a top-tier security threat. Scientists would want to isolate and study your brain to figure out this unknown cognitive effect. But the real chaos kicks off with the markets and the military. They would aggressively race to acquire, regulate, or flat-out replicate your ability because the strategic and financial advantages are practically infinite. Economically speaking, it's a terrifying double-edged sword. On one hand, if only a few powerful elites can predict stock prices or commodity shifts, wealth inequality would just explode to levels we can't even comprehend. It would be a complete monopoly on reality itself. On the other hand, if future sight is broadly available to everyone, markets become completely risk-free. But here's the catch. Without risk, free economics dies. Think about it. If everyone knows a company's new product is going to fail next year, its stock plummets to zero today. Business fundamentally relies on the unknown to generate value and innovation. If tomorrow can be seen today, the global economy just flatlines into total rigidity.
And over in the military sector, this creates an absolutely impossible paradox. If an intelligence agency uses your foresight to anticipate an enemy attack, they naturally reposition their forces, right? But the absolute second the enemy realizes you can see their moves, they alter their behavior. They just change the future you just saw. It becomes this rapid, infinite loop of escalation. The more you know, the more you alter what you know, basically rendering absolute certainty completely useless on the battlefield.
Section 3. The ripple effect on culture and law. Because beyond the markets and the military, there's a much deeper, quieter disruption that would happen. Society's basic emotional contract with time would shatter.
And this brilliantly illustrates how everyday life would fundamentally warp, society would completely fracture into believers and skeptics. And look at the legal implications here. If you know a preventable disaster is going to happen and you say nothing, are you a criminal? Courts would inevitably demand forced disclosure of your visions. Secrecy itself could literally become a punishable crime. You wouldn't even be treated as a human being anymore. You'd be a mandatory emergency warning system. Even art would lose its soul. Storytelling would shift completely away from imagination and what-ifs, and just become a literal, paranoid dialogue about what was actually prophesied.
Let's move to Section 4, Is the Future Fixed? And see how this builds into the mechanics of time itself and, really, the largest existential question of all.
What are you actually seeing? Well, on one hand, we have fixed fate. This is the horrifying prospect that the future you see cannot be changed no matter what you do. Human freedom becomes a complete illusion. We'd all just be actors walking through a pre-written script, waiting for the inevitable. But on the other hand, we have probabilistic outcomes. If the visions are just one possible path, then they act as warnings, not verdicts. This turns your foresight into a navigation tool. But honestly, that distinction carries an unbearable weight of its own.
Because if the future actually can be changed, do you have the right to intervene? It sounds simple at first, like, of course, you stop the tragedy. But what if, in preventing a local house fire, you inadvertently set off a butterfly effect that spawns an entirely new, massive global catastrophe that you couldn't see coming? You are no longer just responsible for your own actions. You carry the crushing moral responsibility for the cascading consequences of playing God with time.
Section 5. Two diverging human futures. If a civilization is armed with future sight, there are really only two ultimate destinies for how this plays out.
So the crucial point is how society chooses to wield this immense power. One path is the best-case scenario, the utopia we hope for, a world where foresight creates patience, where we finally take long-term environmental and social preparation seriously. We use the knowledge to build resilience and guide civilization responsibly. But the other path? That's the much darker and, frankly, perhaps more likely reality. A dystopian prison of paranoia, where elites use future sight for deep corruption, where people micromanage every single second of their lives, and where the sheer terror of a bad future literally stops people from living fully in the present.
Seeing the future wouldn't just be a technological or magical breakthrough. It would be the ultimate test of our species. As this quote notes, human beings are not always ready for power before they are ready for wisdom. It's a profound test to see if our collective maturity actually matches our power, or if we would simply become enslaved by the very truth we sought to uncover.
Knowing tomorrow means losing the mystery of today. It means realizing that without the unknown, you cannot have surprise, you cannot have trust, and you cannot have discovery. If the future is an absolute guarantee, what happens to human resilience? It really forces us to step back and wonder, is uncertainty not a weakness at all, but rather the exact space where hope, courage, and true choice actually live?